Okay, everyone, I've got almost 1:03 by my clock. So let's go ahead and kick this off. So welcome everyone. This is the Energy Services Coalition webinar series. This is our second webinar. My name is John Bush. I am here as a chapter representative for our group today. I'll be kind of emceeing this panel. I'm joined today with Lynn Paget. She is the San Miguel County Project Manager leading their DOLA Renew and Energy Performance Contract Project. So she's going to get to speak a little bit about their experience with San Miguel County and how electrification has been working for them in some of their buildings as they're digging in and seeing some of the challenges and benefits that come with it. So hi there, Lynn.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah, and then we are also joined by Phil Zimmer. Phil is the Energy Services Executive for San Miguel Power Association. So he is the all-knowledgeable beneficial electrification guru for anything happening in San Miguel Power's territory, but also lots of experience with it otherwise. So welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So today we are talking about beneficial electrification for decarbonizing governments. Today, we're really going to focus on the HVAC side of electrification. Some of you may have had a chance to have attended our first webinar, which was focused on the electric vehicle transition piece. That does kind of fall into this term beneficial electrification, but for our purposes, we're really going to look at really the conversion of HVAC and heating systems to electric-based systems. So let's get started and dig in with a little bit of some of the basics of what is electrification? So beneficial electrification or strategic electrification, those terms are completely interchangeable. So you may hear it either way. But really what it is, it's a term for replacing your direct fossil fuel use. And you can think of things like your propane, heating oil, natural gas, with electricity in a way that reduces overall emissions and energy costs. So that's a quote directly from the Environmental and Energy Study Institute. And so this really captures it. You've got a lot of our heating sources, and you can think about your home, but also in your facilities that you're responsible for managing. Oftentimes those have been powered by especially a lot of natural gas here in Colorado, but possibly propane when you're in the more rural areas, and heating oil as well. So it's all about taking some of those systems that are using those fossil direct fuel sources and converting them to electric-based units, which then can be powered either connected by your grid or with solar PV in a way that makes it much more environmentally responsible. But also, again, we're really looking for ways that reduce energy costs as well. So that's kind of the very beginning, all-encompassing what is beneficial electrification when you start hearing that term. And now I'm going to turn it over to Phil, and he's going to talk a little bit about what equipment you might see in your buildings that can be electrified. So, oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead. I'm actually turning it over to Lynn, and she's going to talk about the why of beneficial electrification. So take it away, Lynn.
Sure. Thanks, John. And thanks to everybody for being here and making this webinar possible. So beneficial electrification helps us meet Colorado's ambitious climate action plan, which seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions below a baseline with 90% by 2050, which is coming up fast, 50% by 2030. In addition, the San Miguel County Board of County Commissioners, just like many other local jurisdictions, has a local goal, and our local goal is to be carbon neutral as quickly as possible. So an ambitious project that I've been working on with San Miguel County will actually get us 50% of the way there with our buildings by the end of 2021. Less price volatility and greater budgeting confidence. I work for a small government, and for example, sometimes our propane bills are orders of magnitude higher one year than another year, which causes us difficulty budgeting. So for example, we could have a 3,000% swing on propane costs, just depending which year the bills come in, and so we do a calendar year budgeting cycle. So it's difficult. With electricity, we have a monthly bill. It's much more predictable and means we can budget for our priorities. And efficiency and resilient operations. This is a huge benefit to San Miguel County. For example, we are putting our 911 dispatch on a grid-tied solar PV system, and we're going to have a battery backup, which ensures that in the case of a prolonged power outage, we'll be able to run not just our dispatch and our communications, but we'll actually be able to have hot water for the jail. We'll have the locks and what we call a Sally port actually working. So we just know that we're going to be having more efficient and resilient operations from beneficial electrification and having modern appliances. Some of us, like other local jurisdictions, our appliances are at the end of their life. So being able to switch out a propane or natural gas fossil fuel appliance for a streamlined, efficient, modern electrical appliance is a really huge step towards employee comfort and mission critical functions. And now I think we can introduce Phil. Is that right, John?
That is right. So go ahead, Phil.
Thanks, guys. So multiple heating systems that especially government schools, you'll see most of you have boilers, as you can see here, whether that's hot water or steam, furnaces, large furnaces. I've actually seen in older courthouses, things like that. You know, one of the challenges is they had an old coal furnace that was now being converted to gas and creates some issues in regards to that. So all of those things can be electrified. It can be done with electric, from, you know, the more efficient air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. Those are I would call the Cadillac of what you might want to do or be able to do to electrify your buildings. But we can also do boilers that are electrified. It doesn't have to be propane. Like they said, propane, natural gas is very volatile in price and things like that. So you can have electric boilers. Hot water heaters is another huge opportunity for government buildings, taking, you know, again, propane, natural gas, and converting that to hot water. Now we have heat pump hot water heaters, which are, you know, 200-300% efficient. So that's pretty neat. And then, you know, the radiant heaters that you see there in the slide, those are in a lot of historic buildings, and you know, you can even adapt to those to stay in compliance with historical registries and you know, challenges that those older historical buildings give. We can adapt that electric technologies to still work with the same radiant heaters. So that's almost anything you could do with gas, you can do with electric.
And Phil, I know specifically in San Miguel County, they also have some of those infrared radiant heaters that are actually powered right now with propane for their shop. So some of those high bay applications. So just another great one there. And then Phil, I just wanted to ask you, you know, I haven't come across any size limitations just yet. I've seen systems that can be electrified down to very small residential based units and all the way up to central utility plant kind of size. So just curious your take, if you've seen any limitations on size?
No, and many times, you know, size for especially commercial applications of a gas furnace has to be a whole lot bigger than an electric furnace needs to be, or an electric appliance. So we can do a lot more work with electricity than we can, and oftentimes in a smaller package. So not only are we able to take care of the same heating and cooling loads, but we can do it with a smaller footprint inside the building. And then obviously the real benefit in that is we can be greener, especially if we use renewable resources to power that.
Great. So let's talk about that. Some of those kind of options for you, Phil.
Yeah. So electric resistive heat is what I think most people think of when they think of electric heat. From you know, when I was growing up, it was the baseboard heat or in the ceiling. Pros about that is we have what we've all seen it. We know it's comfortable. We know what it looks like, and it can have a CO2 savings over fossil-based heat, depending on the grid or how you power it, how you get your electricity. Cons is it's less efficient, and it's, you know, if you're wanting to be totally green, that's a phrase we use here at San Miguel a lot. You want to have a zero almost carbon footprint, then you need to power all that electric appliances and HVAC systems with something like solar or renewable energy. And, you know, it has a whole lot more, you need a whole lot more solar to power resistive electric heat than you would like an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump. But it is.
Hey, Phil, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So, ultimately we're talking about electrification, and a lot of this will be grid tied, but the reality is we don't always know, if you're getting your grid tied power, whether it's renewable or it's traditionally based. So how do you, with SAMPA, how do you let your customers know, what's our power mix and what are we providing and what's coming in the future?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is we do keep up to speed on our power mix. We produce 5% of our power, which we're allowed to, locally and renewably. So all of our local stuff is renewable. And then, like many other cooperatives, we have a G&T who provides the other balance of our power. And so they report to us. I think right now it's like 68% of our power is, natural gas, a little bit of coal. That's all being converted. 32% right now of our power is from renewable resources. And just like the counties have goals, so do we. So the idea is by 2025, 50% of our power suppliers energy will be renewables. So as the grid gets more green, and as people add solar, there's, it's two ways to attack it to help with greenhouse gases. One is to help the grid get more green, and the other one would be to do it yourself.
Great, thanks for addressing that. I think that's an important issue. If people are going to power these based on the grid, it really depends on knowing how that power is sourced to understand how much you're really reducing your greenhouse gas footprint.
And if
So
I
now
could just jump. I just wanted to say that San Miguel County actually was one of the first key accounts that made all of our electricity that we purchased from San Miguel Power Association part of their Totally Green program. So regardless of the grid mix that San Miguel Power is ultimately able to get between Tri-State and itself, we're ensuring that San Miguel County's grid electrons are coming 100% from renewable sources. And that's just from the grid alone. We are choosing to green ourselves with an on-site solar PV that's behind the meter at several locations. But ultimately, we can feel good about beneficial electrification because we're purchasing totally green, 100% renewables from San Miguel Power. And it's cost us an extra 1 cent per kilowatt hour, which was something about $6,000 a year for the entire county. Facilities, the county-owned facilities, which is a couple dozen different facilities.
That's a good point, Lynn. I was going to get to a little bit later, but kudos to San Miguel County, and you guys started a kind of a wave of that around here, which I appreciate. So we have a lot of our governmental and especially nonprofit organizations challenging each other to be green, and we provide that through a program called Totally Green. And so San Miguel County was one of the first ones to do that, and they kind of set the benchmark. And they can feel good about no matter what they do for PV or on their side of the meter, every electron that they're delivered as of several months ago is green.
So it helps with that greenhouse gas avoidance calculation from beneficial electricity. It just stretches that effort so much more when our goal is to avoid greenhouse gas emissions.
And certainly beyond just San Miguel Power Association, lots of the utilities across the state have those same types of programs. So you can definitely be looking at your utility provider and figuring out how to ensure that when you do electrify, your power is based from a renewable source. So great comments. So Phil, I'm going to let you keep going. Maybe we'll talk about heat pumps a little bit as some of the options people might see.
Yeah. So this is where I get excited. Baseboard's been around, electric resistive, it's been around. It is 100% efficient. But when you get to something like an air source heat pump, and we now have those cold climate heat pumps, those things are 400% efficient. Then we go to ground source heat pumps, and we're getting into the 400 and 500% efficient. And all that heat, all we're doing is transferring heat. We're not burning anything to make heat. So back to air source heat pumps, one of the pros obviously is it's now suitable for all climates. We have air source heat pumps in Telluride, Colorado. We have them in the warmer, Nuclear and Hatarita climates in our service territory, and they work great. The office building here in Ridgeway is heated and cooled completely by air source heat pumps. Cons are a little bit more upfront cost, obviously, than resistive electric heat. but not a whole lot because we do have rebates that help with that. And then ground source heat pumps, in my opinion, are the Cadillac. Very stable, most efficient option. Work well in super hot or super cold climates. Obviously, loop size is varies depending on where you're at. The only con is obviously a little higher upfront cost because we're drilling wells into the into the ground, or we're digging horizontal boreholes. So, but those are three of the more, I guess, modern and widely used HVAC replacements. Next slide, if you would.
Great, thanks. Phil, yep, I think I just changed it. And now I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So Lynn, what have you kind of seen a little bit as you've been pursuing electrification in 3 of your county buildings? Lynn, did we lose you? I think.
I have a double mute. I apologize.
There we go.
Yeah, safety first, right?
Yeah.
No, this was not a challenge for San Miguel County, but it is a challenge I hear for other jurisdictions, and that is not working with your utility first. So as soon as we conceived of considering on-site renewable energy behind the meter self-generation and our beneficial electrification, we reached out to San Miguel Power Association and began working with our utility up front. Don't get all the way to the end of a design to contact your utility and then find out that there's some sort of barrier, whether it's a grid level barrier or sometimes it's a transformer upgrade that's needed, and then considering the timing of that, conduit wiring, panels, in order to achieve the beneficial electrification. So not necessarily our big challenge, but one that others experience. And San Miguel Power has just been fantastic to work with. And also San Miguel Power can help identify rebates, which helps us figure out the business model or the budget for our beneficial electrification desires. Utility costs on the challenge side can sometimes be cost neutral, meaning that you don't really save money on your utility bill just from doing beneficial electrification. So a challenge for us was timing beneficial electrification with other efficiency measures in order to achieve an ultimate utility cost savings. And that was particularly important to participate with the Colorado Energy Office program, which I can talk a little more about. The age of appliances, I think, is important to mention. If we were replacing a new propane radiant heater with a new electric radiant heater, we may not quite have seen the cost savings that we did, but we were replacing end-of-life equipment that was underperforming and not providing comfort or functionality to our facilities or our employees. So that when I was looking at a cost analysis, we took that into account. Permitting is another potential challenge. Different jurisdictions can have different building codes and different electrical codes. And in San Miguel County's location, we actually share electrical permitting and inspections across jurisdictions. So without getting too in the weeds, I'll just mention that checking out the permitting up front when you contact your utility about your project idea is really important to avoid unexpected challenges later. And then just to go back to funding, for local governments in particular and nonprofits, we often are pretty cash strapped. And so being able to utilize energy performance contracting for the Colorado Energy Office, or capitalize on DOLA's renewable program, which I think, John, you're going to talk about, is really been important for us. But neither one of those programs actually provides a financial incentive for just greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So for example, the Colorado Energy Office, we have to show a utility savings. And like I said, sometimes these projects are cost neutral and there's not really a value that you can put on resiliency. But I'll tell you that for San Miguel County to achieve resiliency through adding batteries and on-site solar with our beneficial electrification to our Our sheriff's headquarters, jail, and dispatch center is huge. And it's really, you can't measure a value to being able to dispatch confidently without having to resort to cell phones or Facebook, which we have in the past. So that was kind of my short list of challenges. I can keep going, but I think I want to give some airtime to our other presenters.
Yeah, sounds good, Lynn, and thank you. And certainly, I just want to point out, this last one that I've got is just consumer acceptance. I think there's a familiarity with just doing a like-for-like replacement. The reality is that electrification, especially when we talk about heat pumps and resistance heat, it's been there, it's proven. So, it is there. And so this, just getting over this hump mentally, this is part of why we're doing this webinar, is to show people that it's being done, it's proven, and that should not be a barrier. Just because you can say, well, it's how we've always done it, or, we've already got the gas infrastructure and it's just a simple swap out. Those kind of arguments are really not carrying as much weight these days. So I just wanted to point that out. So thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.
All right, and then we're going Yeah, great. And so then I'm just going to go briefly, we're talk a little bit about some resources and help. So, the first thing that we want to call out, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs has their Renew grants. So if you don't know about those already, you can see a link on the screen. This is a great initiative within the state that DOLA has funded to promote renewable energy adoption as well as electrification. So, when we talk about, we have these goals and targets that are set by the current state administration, having some tools and resources to help get you there is really, really important. So right now, DOLA and their Renew program has some rolling grant applications that are open. So anybody, if you're thinking about these, this is a great time to be moving on and seeing if you can get something going here. And the first step is just to contact your DOLA regional manager. So again, through this link that you can see on the website, that'll take you right there and give you access to all those contacts. But it's a great way to start looking at how can we supplement and have some funding to help us do some of this early on. So the other kind of resource that I'd be remiss if I didn't point to, the Energy Services Coalition. We are a group of about 14 or 15 energy services companies here in Colorado. We have a lot of the expertise to help you start assessing your buildings and looking at, what is the opportunity that might sit inside my county, in my building, or my city, or whatever it may be. And how we typically work, we work through the Colorado Energy Office, their Energy Performance Contract Program. So all of those members of the Energy Services Coalition who are ESCOs, they work through the Colorado Energy Office. So this is another program that's available to all of these political subdivisions at free, no cost to you, just through a simple non-binding MOU. You have the opportunity to access their technical resources, contract templates, and a whole host of other items that, again, will just help you start assessing, what is the opportunity that we have to potentially electrify our heating systems in our buildings. And then I really want to turn it back to Phil for just a quick conversation too about, partnering with your utility. As Lynn alluded to, this was a really critical part that the county was, really forward thinking and reaching out early. So Phil, maybe you could just speak to a little bit of how you guys come to the table and how you can see utilities around the state helping out.
Yeah, number one, kudos to again, San Miguel County, who reached out well ahead of time. Sometimes, as she mentioned, you've got to, in order to pull this off on a large scale, you've got to have infrastructure and equipment put in place. And in today's world, we're now seeing like 8-month leads on transformers and things like that. Now, hopefully that supply chain catches up soon, but the sooner you can get with your utility provider, the sooner they can help you, because most of them have rebate programs and beneficial electrification programs. And so they want to help you, number one. Number two, they can kind of help you, not step on as many rakes, hopefully. So here's what we want, San Miguel County. They came to us and said, here's what we want to do. We said, that's awesome. And so over the next several months, back and forth with, hey, maybe we can get some funding here, and here's what we can do here. And I'll tell you what, we're going to move this over here and change this transformer to here and swap out for them and all kinds of things. So again, they can be your, they're not the big scary power company all the time. They can be one of your best friends and help you, because in a lot of cases, especially you get to the right person at that company, they're just as passionate about this as you are. So it does help with planning and things like that. And they can also point you to a host of sometimes funding and rebate programs that'll help you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And, in my experience, it's not just the co-ops, it's really, the municipal utilities, our investor-owned utilities.
Yeah.
They all have programs, they are incentivized to participate and come to the table with these. So they have programs. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. Like San Miguel has done. They've actually purchased green power to pay that small 1 cent a kilowatt premium. Now they know they can electrify and they don't have to, because, not every building maybe is a candidate for on-site generation. So still say, hey, we're in a good position to know that we're getting those greenhouse gas savings and really trying to work towards and meet those goals. So I just can't really emphasize enough how important your utility partner is going to be. And, today we're only talking about the building side of this. When we start talking about how electric vehicles and the transportation side of things is also going to transition, that relationship only becomes more important going forward. And the reality is we see electrification coming across multiple sectors. And so the utility bill already has that infrastructure and ability to provide it. So they're going to be very involved going forward, without a doubt. So, okay, everyone, we wanted to keep this, kind of brief and to the point. And so I envisioned about 30 minutes and we're just about on it. So I do want to take this time and open it up and see if we got some other Q&A questions from folks about electrification or any comments, anything that people have seen. So feel free to either come off mute or type them into the chat window and we'll address them. Any questions? I see Carol just asked if we're going to share the slides, and yes, Carol, we can absolutely share these slides with you. We are also recording and we're going to post this on our website so you can come back to it later as well. Any other questions? This group is making it too easy. Anybody else on the line thinking about electrification?
You guys answered all their questions. Here's one. Here's a question.
Great. So Xia Fang, do you think Xcel Energy will have new utility rates that will reward electrification anytime soon? So let's see, specific to Xcel Energy, I don't know the specific answer to that. Certainly, I would say that Xcel has been quite progressive overall about offering programs to support electrification. Also, when you look at their fuel mix, I'd say they're one of the more early adopting IOUs. I would recommend, Xia, a conversation with your account rep if you're in Xcel's territory. Reach out to them if you know who that person is. If not, we can kind of direct you to some other resources, but start with them and ask them that exact question. Try and ask them where they think their rebates are going to go, where their rates might go. We've come across instances where if you want to, electrify your EV charging infrastructure, for example, they need to have appropriate rates to do that. And maybe utilities are in process or aren't quite there, but they might have a roadmap. So, have those conversations with them directly, and they'll be able to address that best.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
One thing to add is, back to the utility thing, like he said, call and ask. We had some members approach us, and Xcel's no different, and said, hey, we want to do EV fast chargers is one example we recently dealt with. But when we look at your rate structure, what happens if, only one guy charges, and because you got demand rates commercially that you guys are probably aware of. So San Miguel Power developed a pilot EV charging rate. And that's one example of how somebody like Xcel, if you get with them, here's what we're looking at. Here's what our challenges are. Here's what our barriers to entry, so to speak, are. Start that conversation, because, I'd say more often than not, it starts the ball rolling and gets heads to thinking on their side. And you can be the cause of new rate structures or new programs. So, sometimes the answer is no, but don't be afraid to ask the question to your power supplier, because they're there for you. You're their member owner, or you're who they're ultimately trying to serve. So anyway, point is just have that chat with them.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Can,
thanks,
can I talk?
Yeah,
I
please go ahead.
think the beneficial electrification, what we really struggle is the energy cost side. And I think Lynn was mentioning some of the incentive on the resiliency side, the customer wanted to do it. And for us, I mean, you pointed out a few, kind of dollar grants and incentives, but again, and also when it comes to the volatility, we know propane is volatile, but natural gas price has been staying low, and also when we have customers getting transport gas, I mean, the cost of natural gas is also going lower and lower. So it's almost at the current phase, what we need to do is like, unless we have to engage all these different conversations and utilizing all these incentives as much as possible before we can make a case to the client, unless this is something the client really wanted to do. That's kind of what I feel is still the challenge. I really hope, our local utility companies can come up with more rewards like the transportation electrification plan, stuff like that. That would really, that's where the market, that's what things will shift the market. That's what I feel.
Is there, following up on Gia's excellent comment, is there a sort of a clearinghouse for our state of just what the different rates are from our different electricity utility providers, so that somebody could compare and contrast and see where there's progressive rates or incentive-based rates and where there's barriers?
It's a really good question. Does anybody know of a resource like that? Other than going to individual utilities and pulling all that data?
All I know is eGrid. eGrid has all these different resource mix, but California, their coal percent is like way less than Excel territory or like, Rocky Mountain Power, which still has about 33% of that's coal in the grid.
Yeah, so eGrid, okay.
Sometimes PV programs like PV Watts, I think the PV Watts does it. They kind of know where you're at, and here's what it's not always completely accurate, but it gives you a good idea for your specific territory. But I'm not aware of one that lists them all out, statewide.
Yeah, okay. And then Carol, I see that you've already done, it looks like, quite a number of ground source heat pump systems. Would you be interested in coming off and just telling us for a few minutes why you did it and kind of how your experience was? Maybe not. Oh, there she goes. Go ahead, Carol. See, you came off mute and then went back on.
Can the host unmute Carol?
Yep, I think I can.
Good, I see
There,
it.
now you're
Unmuted.
Can't hear you, Carol. Maybe we got some microphone issues. We can't quite get you, but maybe you could even type it into the chat so we could all see. Again, we'd just be curious to hear, why you chose to do it and a little bit maybe what your experience was. How about
John,
anybody else? Oh,
I
go ahead,
know
Phil.
there's some in our service territory. There's organizations working towards affordable housing, and several of those are now interested in ground source heat pump, kind of like what she referred to. And what we're seeing is, in economies of scale, when you go to drill vertical wells in this case, it was preliminary. I think math was like $2,000 to $3,000 per home when they do them all at once to drill these wells, and that's really the only cost difference between a regular, what we'd call a regular heating system and a ground source heat pump, is we have loops in the ground. So that $2,000 to $3,000 is mostly taken care of by rebates, in this case from San Miguel Power. So in many cases, to some of the other questions as well, again, it just pays to have that conversation, because I've seen a lot of cases where it's actually cheaper for And again, we're talking about developments of houses, but you can do the same thing with buildings. Many times it's cheaper upfront cost to install, electric or ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps than it would be to do, resistive heating or things like that. So it's not always a premium upfront. And of course, it's always going to have the math is going to work out when you use a technology that's, 400 or 500% efficient. So again, make sure you consult your utilities and see if they have rebates or things like that, because that's the idea of those, is to tear down those barriers to market penetration by offering incentives and rebates.
Great, and I see that we did get, Carol was able to type in a little bit, so thanks for sharing that. So sounds like you've got a sizable facility there with the Moby complex. So you've got your geothermal system, great for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also lowest life cycle costs. So it sounds like, Carol, you were assessing this based on a total cost of ownership. So maybe I'm just curious, I'm just about to type it in the chat, how's the maintenance been on your system? Any issues you've been running into? And I know you got to type it in again, so we'll give you a quick minute. Brand new. Okay, so they're brand new systems. It sounds like it's probably working well for you. Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Those are the great experiences that we want to hear and we want to share. So thank you for typing that in. All right. Anybody else on the call have anything else before we call it a day that they'd like to share or ask any questions about? Okay, well, hearing none, I'd like to say thank you to Lynn from San Miguel County. Thank you to Phil from San Miguel Power Association. Appreciate you being here. And again, we will be posting this online. So if anybody wants to revisit or circulate to anybody else you think might be interested, please do so. I'll send a note out to everybody who attended today with a copy of the slides and a link to where you can find the video. So thank you, everyone, and have a great Monday.
John, thank you for organizing this.
Yes, thank you. I'm proud to have been able to participate. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.